Hi, and welcome to Reflection Radio here at Reflection Studio with Ian McKay. I'm here excitingly with Johnny Ward. Hi, Johnny. It is so good to see you.
Nice to see you again, mate. It's been a while.
It's been a very long time. Too long.
Yeah.
Now you are, I can't really put you into words, so I don't really want to start there. I think it's something that people have to check out. You started with an amazing blog, obviously, where you have, accomplished many things that people have to check out. I will make sure they do. But I want to hear a little bit more about you. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience here at Reflection Radio?
Sure. So my name's Johnny Ward. I'm from Ireland. I guess by trade, I'm still kind of a blogger, but I do a lot of online business stuff. And how I met Ian here is I also run a non-profit where we build community projects around the world for developing communities. And my life has been like quite a wild ride the last 15 years or so. So I'm 37 now. And to cut a very long story short, I grew up with quite a tricky childhood in my first few years of life. My father, it's a very heavy domestic issues that we ended up moving to Northern Ireland anyway, just my mother and myself. So I grew up single parent on welfare in Ireland. Never could go on holiday or anything, wouldn't have any money, wouldn't have a car, no central heating, nothing like that. So on the breadline for a fair chunk of time. And then I always wanted to be free. So I wanted to travel. After I finished university at 22, so 15 years ago, I wanted to travel, but my mum had no money to help me travel, nor should she, and I had no money. So I did some medical research where you get locked in hospital, and they test drugs on you for a month. You're not allowed out, and maybe we'll talk about that later. And with that money, I studied an English teaching qualification that allowed me to teach English in Asia, and I then moved to Thailand one-way ticket. And over the next 4 or 5 years, I would travel in Asia, run out of money, travel, run out of money. And every time I'd run out of money, I would teach English in Thailand and South Korea. Anyway, I moved to Australia after that kind of 5-year period because I was worried that living off $10 a day and sleeping in bus stations is cool in your 20s, but was I just starting to become a bum? So then I got a real job in Australia for a year. This worked out that the real world is not for me. I had my first experience with depression, hating my life, crying on a Sunday, thinking about a Monday morning. So I started my blog, onestepforward.com. And then I set myself a goal of being the first person from Ireland and one of the few people, and certainly one of the youngest people, to visit every country in the world. And then I traveled full time for the next 7 or 8 years, 2 nights here, 1 night there, 3 nights here, all the way up until 2017 when I finally finished my journey to every country in the world. And then I was free. So after another bout of what could easily be described as depression in the aftermath of having a big 10-year goal and then suddenly waking up and having nothing to do, I snapped out of that after a few months. And then I set myself the goal of trying to be the first person in history to visit every country, North Pole, South Pole, and climb the 7 summits, the highest mountain in every continent. And I've nearly finished that, thankfully. But COVID hit. So I've been doing a lot of ultra marathons and ultra marathons and cycling across countries and stuff. And then recently I just rode across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat. That's the long story short.
Oh my God. You know what? I was trying to figure out how do I introduce this guy? And I was just like, I'm just going to throw it at him to do, because that is not something I'm going to be able to break down. And man, it is so admirable. And it's like, we were just kind of talking about before, like the intensity, like just going for something. And I always admire, like, so the one step forward, can you just break down your motto or your?
Yeah. Well, it's quite simple. So my blog started off as a travel blog, and the concept was dream big, travel far, live full, right?
Yeah.
And actually, it was still, now I talk a lot about life and how to work online and how I do the things that I do and all that, which is cool because I want to show people from my kind of background, you don't have to come from a wealthy background to live a cool life. Mm-hmm. So, but when I kind of thought about this whole dream big, travel far, live full, I was fully in every country in the world mode when I designed that. But actually, it's more appropriate now. Now I'm still doing cool stuff and big goals because it's actually more fitting to the kind of life that I live now, where you think like, yeah, if you're going to do something, do it properly and don't limit yourself, because it might take a lot of pain and sacrifice for your ultimate goal, but you can get there. And if you're going to get there, then make sure the goal's worth getting there for. So make it a big goal. And that's what I do.
If you're going to go for it, you might as well just go for it. Absolutely. And, you know, when we bring people on here, I always try to bring on people that have, passion, performance, and perspective, obviously. And you just like scream all those things. So it was so cool to see you finish, the Atlantic row. And I'd like to talk about a lot of those things today, because in some ways, I follow your blog and I just see what you're putting on Instagram and things like that. And this one really looked like something different from my perspective. And I think after reading your blog, it sounded very different from all of the versus an ultra marathon and the traveling the world and all of those experiences. This seems like something very, very specific to your nature. And I think was surprising, I imagine. How did you get into that? If you can break that down? Because not only is it an amazing feat, but it's actually an amazing cause.
Yeah. Obviously, when you row the Atlantic or the Pacific, they're roughly the same size from a rowing perspective, maybe an extra week or two. It means that you have to go offline for 2 months, basically, and maybe a bit more. So because I work online, digital media and my blog and blah, 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 to go offline for 2 months is a huge opportunity cost there. So the actual expedition itself to row an ocean costs a fortune. Costs about $100,000 to get a boat and the team together. Thankfully, we lost sponsors, so I only had to pay $10,000 US, which is still loads, but at least it's not 100. So there's that expense too. But then the opportunity cost of being offline would normally smash me as well. I'd lose the money that I would make. So because COVID struck and I'm in the travel world, kind of travel lifestyle world, my business had gone to hell anyway. So it's going offline. Yeah. So it was actually kind of serendipity that to go offline suddenly was a prospect that the opportunity cost was much less than it had been in previous years. If I was ever going to go offline for 2 months, COVID's the time to do it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, a few years previously, I'd run an ultra marathon in the Sahara Desert called the Marathon des Sables. It's a really cool thing. It's known as the hardest foot race in the world. 6 marathons, 6 days in the sand. And one of the days I was running, I think on the third day, the third marathon, I was running with an English Marine, and he had rowed across the Atlantic. And I didn't even know it was a thing. And he was a lovely guy, posh, like everyone who does these kind of things seems to be, but lovely. And I was like, wow, that's cool. I want to do that. And he put me onto a Facebook group that's kind of a community of the handful of people who've rowed across oceans. And I just clicked like, and then was never involved in any of the conversations or anything. And then, I don't know, maybe my social media use, like shamefully to admit, increased during COVID when I'm stuck at home all day on my laptop and my phone. So that group popped up, what's July 2021 now, so October last year, so just 6, 7, 8 months ago, a big yellow image popped up in that group saying we need 2 people to complete our team of 4. We're rowing across the Atlantic in 3 months. Does anyone want to join? And I just applied and was accepted.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it Monkey Fist, right? Is the
yeah. It wasn't the most organized outfit. Lovely guys, but it wasn't the most organized outfit. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, and like, do you need to be that organized to row across the Atlantic? You know what I mean? Like, give it a break. No, that's so from being picked. So you got picked out of, how many people there's a lot of people that are probably as insane as you, but no one at the same caliber. You got picked. And also you obviously have an amazing following on social media and things like that would benefit as well, right? Yeah. It's the quality of the row. But wait a minute. Actually, before I get into that, you have never, as you're saying this, you've never touched a rowboat.
Never touched a rowboat, never touched an oar, never even seen a rowboat. Or a sailboat for that matter. Just a nautical novice. All right, that's fair.
So from there, so you got picked, and then where did it go from there?
Within 6 weeks, I flew back to London. I live in Thailand, and I live in Bangkok, which is where I'm doing this interview from. Within 6 weeks, I flew back to London to do a sea survival course because, like I mentioned in the blog post, I can't really swim or anything in a traditional sense. So they had to make sure that I knew how to survive if we went over, if it capsized or anything. But to be honest, that was a waste of time. It was more of a health and safety insurance thing. I didn't really learn anything. But the real drama for that, Ian, to be honest, was like I got picked in October. Early December, I went back for the sea survival course, and we were due to start early to kind of mid-January. But my wedding was in February, so I had to tell my missus, because I hadn't told her that I applied for it, because I assumed I would get picked. You know, it's one of these things, hundreds of people are applying, you never think it's you. And then when you see any other these other things on social media, when someone does something cool, they're like, and I applied for something and 2,000 people applied and I got picked. And you always think like, well, yeah, that just never happens to you. You're never the one out of the hundreds that gets picked. Anyway, it was me. So I hadn't told my missus that I'd applied because I just assumed I wouldn't get picked. And then when I got picked, I had to say, listen, the whole wedding thing, I'm off to Rhodia, London. And that was a disaster.
That's amazing. But it is amazing. It suits you perfectly, and that makes sense. And it's not like you can get married anytime. You only get to roll the Atlantic once, right? Yeah. Yeah. That is it. So that's pretty amazing. And like, so when you got picked, was it just like your shit just kind of threw up in your throat a little bit? You were like, oh, I'm here now. Yeah.
Completely. Because the application form, like a lot of these kind of things, wasn't that long. I didn't treat it like a piece of shit. I don't know if I can swear. Sorry. You know,
you can do anything you want.
Obviously, with my blog, I get a lot of job applications and people asking me, how do I do this with my life? What's it? And I try to reply to every email that I get, right? But the first email I normally shoot back is quite quick. Still reply to it, and then I wait and see what they come back with. Because I'm not about to sacrifice my time and effort and thought if they can't be asked to put together a constructed email or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
People like that, time wasters, who want to just click their fingers and be on the other side. They want to be where I am now, about 10 years graft, but whatever. So I don't want to be one of those people, and I try not to ever be one of those people. So when I did my application form, I did it properly, but it still only took half an hour, maybe an hour max.
Yeah.
And then then I had a few interviews with them, but then they hit me with it. They didn't mention this in any of the processes until I got selected. Then they said, "Oh, it's $20,000 each." And I was like,
20 G's.
Yeah. And I've obviously I've got the wedding coming up. I had to pay for. I'm building a house in Thailand, and I was like, that is a lot of money.
Wow.
So I had to tell my missus, not only am I postponing the wedding, I'm also throwing 20 grand into this thing.
You're lucky the Irish are so charming.
And then thank God, like 3 days before the 20 grand was due, a sponsor came on and paid half. So I had to only pay 10 grand, which is still a chunk.
Absolutely.
Better than 20.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I went back to the UK, did the sea survival course, but I don't know how much news it made in Canada and in North America, but Brexit was kicked in on the 1st of January.
Yeah.
And then that just caused loads of problems because the boat got built in England. I was now in England. And when you row across the Atlantic, you leave from a little group of islands called the Canary Islands that belong to Spain. And they're just off the coast of Morocco in Africa. And UK had this new strain of COVID on top of that. So all flights out of the UK were banned. UK citizens were banned from going anywhere. And the boat couldn't leave England because none of the paperwork, Brexit, EU weren't accepting goods from the UK because of Brexit and all this. So then all the delays and headaches and everything started kicking in, and it just turned into a nightmare.
So you had Brexit, you had COVID, and like I said, everyone has to go and read this blog. It was amazing. But also, as you're rowing across the Atlantic, you're in open water. And there tends to be seasonal things that might take place in large bodies of water.
Yeah.
So you were delayed. So from the initial where you like got accepted and that kind of thing, the initial start date where you were going to take off until you actually did with all of those accompanying issues, how much did that set you back?
About 2 months. So we were due to leave in mid-Jan. Brexit and COVID pushed that back to, let's say, mid-Feb. And then the company that we were going with made a lot of mistakes with gear and all the rest. Like I said, it was a bit chaotic. That probably was another month. And then when we finally set off, our boat broke down. We had to get rescued by the Spanish Coast Guard. And then we had a big hole in the boat. So we got towed back to a different island. And then we had to fix that. We lost another week there.
Yeah.
And it's not really like a common thing to row the Atlantic. But there are people who do it every year. There's a few hundred people have done it in history. So it's not like we weren't the first. I mean, it's not like everyone's doing it for their summer holiday, but lots of people have done it before.
Yeah.
And the way it works is you want to leave in December or January because the tide and the waves and the wind and the current are all in your favor. And if you do that, it should take you about 2 months. World record is about 40 days. And the later you leave it, from leaving in December and January, the currents become less and the winds don't become less, but they become less in your favor and they're just swirling around all over the place. So the waves are massive and da-da-da. So we didn't, after all the delays and then after our boat breaking down, getting rescued and then fixing the boat, we didn't end up leaving, I think, until like March 14th or something like that, or 11th or something. So we were 2 months late and hurricane season comes in to the Caribbean where we'd be finishing. Kind of June is the thick of the hurricane season. So if you're a bit unlucky and it starts a few weeks early, that's May. And if you leave in March, you're going to be finishing in May. So you just don't do that really. It's just not the done thing. But here we were because we were doing it independent and unsupported. No one could tell us what to do or what not to do. So we just went anyway. It was scary.
Yeah. That would add a whole nother element to it for sure.
Yeah. I wasn't too worried about it.
No, I imagine not. And like once you've already gone through the initial work, it's kind of like you're in it. As much as you're not boats and oars in the water, you're in it. So that's pretty intense. Yeah, so you didn't obviously have to row through hurricane season, but you just came across like the worst swells and waves and cold weather, I imagine.
Just stuff that you just never imagined, that you just think of movies, like skyscraper sized waves. And you're in this tiny boat that like would fit in your front room, like 8 meters or whatever. And you're on top of a wave or on the trough of a wave, and you're looking out, and the wave is literally like a row of apartments, and you know what's coming. And another one after that, and another one after that, and another one after that, and just goes on as far as the eye can see, and you're just going up and down it. It's wild. And then sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The actual routine for the row is what makes it kind of brutal is you do 2 hours rowing, 2 hours resting, 24 hours a day, all through the night and everything for the whole 2 months. So you have to try to sleep in little 30-minute batches, which is pretty tough over a period of months.
No kidding. So you literally just had you had 4 hours of sleep and then 4 hours of rowing kind of thing?
2 hours rowing, 2 hours resting, 2 hours rowing, 2 hours resting, 6 shifts a day.
And your rest was not you didn't get to just go late. You had to eat within that 2 hours too. And you had to do everything else that you possibly would have to, quote unquote rest.
Yeah. You have to sort out all your gear. So when the storms are there, you've got this big gear on. So you have to take all your gear off. You have to boil water, eat your dehydrated food. You have to tend to all your blisters. Your hands are all falling apart, red raw, bleeding. Your feet are bleeding. Your ass is a bit like that too. I had this jock rot all over my groin and cream on and everything. Because you're never dry. For 2 months, you're not dry. You're drenched for 2 months and you'd never have an opportunity to be dry. So you have to tend to all your wounds. And that takes food and all that takes the best part of an hour. So then you have an hour and you have about 45 minutes left and you've got to try to sleep if you can. But I really struggled to sleep because I felt so isolated and alone out there. I was so down, regretting signing up for it, and I really struggled to sleep. So I just spent most of the time sitting on my back, staring at the ceiling until someone knocked the window and said, "Johnny, it's your turn to row again." I'm like, "Okay, ready, let's go."
And I'm just thinking about kind of switching gears here. Not that this is amazing. It's an amazing feat, but it sounds horrific. It sounds like torture.
It's more horrific than amazing because it's not that hard. The hard thing is just the misery. Like, it's not enjoyable, the process at all. There's no joy. So you're miserable the whole time. But the actual physical achievement is not that much because the elements do most of the work for you.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yeah, because you're following the kind of current and going with it, eh?
The achievement is just that you've suffered. But then I feel like it's not that. I feel like a bit of a fraud because, yes, I endured that and it was really tough mentally and emotionally. But what could I have done? Who knows if I'm a quitter or not? I couldn't get off. It wasn't a proactive choice of me being like, I'm so hardcore, I'm going to stick with this. It's whether I want to get off or not, I can't get off. So suck it up. Yeah,
you're in it. But you know what? And this is where I kind of found it really interesting. Like when I was going through your thing, one thing that stood up is like, you kind of had about depression and that, you know, when you were out there, it's like one gray cloud, right? Like that's like, I imagine when you're running an ultra marathon, you get to a new destination and you get to witness success. But when you're just rowing through one gray cloud, that would be absolute, like you said, Groundhog Day, and just kind of torturous in that way. But I think, so this was also part of like supporting male mental health.
It was, yeah. Actually, we raised 20 grand to like 25,000 Canadian for men's mental health and an animal sanctuary because it was a meat-free expedition. I haven't eaten meat for years, and the whole boat was meat-free, so that was cool. But actually, retrospectively, the cause is hugely worthwhile. Men's mental health generally is, and even more so now with COVID and men's mental health, of course, with suicide. I don't know what the Canadian statistics are like, but it's the biggest killer of men under 30 in the UK and Ireland, ahead of cancer, ahead of road deaths, everything. It's the number one killer of men. So yeah, for sure, it was a massively worthwhile cause. And the charity is called Human, which is like with men. Yeah. They do these amazing online spaces where you can talk about your issues in a non-judgmental zone. And I know people who are listening to this who've never done that kind of thing will be like, yeah, it sounds a bit hippie vibe for me. Just give it a try on one little online meet and you'll change your opinion. That's what happened to me when I used it. And I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. So anyway, but ironically, I don't think it was a great expedition to promote men's mental health because it absolutely destroyed my own mental health because it was such a cool experience. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's, and when I think of, like, a lot of times when I think of, you know, men's mental health, when I think of you being encapsulated, just suffering silently with no way out, in some ways that does represent a lot of male mental health issues, right? It is something that, right? Like, it is something that I don't want you to have to go through that, my friend. But the fact you were stuck in it, the fact that you didn't see a way out, that there was no opportunity. When I was reading through your blog, I was very, very just struck by that. And then I think the next portion of it was talking about how the life raft was in your boat. So it was like all of these things were coming together and just hit my brain in that way. And it was very, very, you know, it just paid homage in a different way. I felt awful for you, but I feel that, you know, if you can find those types of chat rooms or someone who is listening that wants to do something like that, and we've talked about this in the podcast many times, just being, you know, I think men need to find the way that they need to speak about mental health. A lot of times we get caught in the idea that we all have to speak about mental health in the way that, you know, you go and see a psychologist, or you go and see, you know, speak in the way that we speak about emotions that maybe more feminine nature or other people might. You need to find how to speak about it to you. But a lot of times you're too isolated to do that. So it really spoke to me that you were trapped in this tiny boat surrounded by other dudes, just with your own emotions, unable to put them anywhere. That sounds like a lot more than, like you said, the rowing there was kind of an auto-regulated thing, but getting there mentally sounded like a lot more a mission.
On that note about the men's mental health, a lot of times too, and this is certainly what I used to think about before I was facing all my issues, was that when you talk about mental health, you have this picture in your mind of like, someone in a white coat or getting in some perhaps online in the modern world during COVID, and you're talking about like how your mum neglected you when you were 2 years old, blah, blah. That's not my story, by the way. I've got a great relationship with my mum, but my idea is that it doesn't necessarily mean that. Sometimes it's just giving you a platform to be like, and this fucking pissed me off because of this, and this was pissing me off because of that. And someone's listening there on the other side. They can also, if you want, they can add a rational voice to it too. It's not always about like some deep Freudian conversation. Sometimes all you need is the space to be able to vent. If you're in a situation where you have to be the strong guy, if your family or your friends or whatever, to be able to confess your stresses even is a huge step.
Mm-hmm. I always try to look at like going to counseling or finding something like that is you're trying to find the unbiased person to hold a mirror for you, right? Where you can witness you're not a monster, you're not weak, you're not any of those things. Like you get to look at yourself through possibly just like the proper, reframing that someone can give you, or just the shoulder to, or like ear to like listen to you in the problem that you have. Sometimes you can't solve problems. Sometimes problems are just fucking problems. And in that you just have to persevere. And, that's why this whole thing spoke to me. And I appreciate you saying that, because I think it gets lost in the Hollywood kind of idea of what is therapy.
That's a better way to say it. Exactly. Yes, completely.
Yeah, it's and it's so important, especially going through COVID and things like that. And yeah, you just got to find your way. So I really appreciate that, because we were like in the beginning of this, we actually talked about how, that's not really. When did you come to like the coming of age or like the experience where you're like, shit, I got stuff that I should handle mentally?
Well, so I'm 37 now. For sure, a lot later in my life, I did have it like a really tricky young period of my life, and then I wasn't a great kid, getting in trouble and blah blah blah. So, and I had no father figure, like I said, and no male figure. My mom had no men in her life. I had no uncle, no brothers, anything, right? So, but all of these reflections are something that I've come to recently. I never thought about any of this stuff until I say this, like 30 plus for sure, but probably in the direct aftermath of when I finished that 10-year every country thing. So kind of, I finished on St. Patrick's Day because I'm a walking cliche in 2017. And I then for about 4 or 5 months, I was just drinking. I broke up with my missus, sleeping around, like partying, thinking I'm having a good time, but actually depressed, killing myself with booze and drugs. And my business went to shit, completely all on me. And I managed to snap out of it through fitness, as always. And that's when I started looking at like why I'm doing these kind of self-destructive things, and also why I'm driven towards goal setting and type A personality and all that. So that was only 4 years ago. So not until I was 33 did I start looking at it. And then for all the bad sides of the row, I didn't manage to fully know myself, my strengths, and more importantly, my weaknesses until the row. The row was brutal, and I wouldn't recommend it, but I learned so many lessons about myself because I had such a long period of time to do nothing else but reflect on who I am and what I've done and what I want to do and all this. Yeah. No, it's it's just, like I said, a coming of age experience, whatever you want to call it. It's interesting to hear where people come from that, and to see that like through massive success and like living your dreams and achieving your dreams, that might not be the answer to everyone's sadness. Right. Yeah. Like that's so like, you're a very goal oriented guy, and you're like a ultra marathon runner. Like it's a breed in of itself. And I think that everyone could take some of that you have, and hopefully, and I think you inspire a lot of people to do that. You inspire me to do that. Part of the reason when I came back from the initial trip that we did, I actually got really into being like, what am I going to do with my damn self? Right. Like I should be able to carry myself, start a business, do whatever it is. And that was like a perpetual cycle of like going on my own and quitting a job. And like you mentioned in the beginning, like being in just a depression of like, oh, it's fucking Sunday, to starting what it is. So you have that natural thing. Where do you think, one, that came from? And where do you think it's like, I see you now getting stronger through vulnerability, but where do you think that came from? And where do you think you need to put it next? Where I thought it came from, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I'd have a different answer. But after the emotional roller coaster of the road, I don't have answers per se, but I have more questions I think point to where it's come from. So I really believe which is why when I'm hopefully going to have kids in the next year or so, and hopefully I live happily ever after with my missus. But if I don't, for sure, I will be there for my kid forever, because I know what it's like to grow up without a father. And then even worse, without, like, I've got no time for sob stories, to be honest. I'm more about tough love, but also there's realities that you have to acknowledge. So the lack of father figure, or the lack of male figure in my life through my entire first 18 years, like I didn't have a conversation with a grown man that wasn't a teacher at school, where I was getting in trouble all the time anyway, for literally 18 years. You know what I mean? It's really an unhealthy way to grow up. So I often now think, am I trying to prove to myself that I'm a man, or what? And no one's taught me the lessons of what it means to be a man. Is this what I have to do to be a man? Do I have to be the strongest version of myself? Do I have to be the best in the world at A or B? So those might not be a healthy realization of what pushes me, but it also might be part of the truth, and I have to acknowledge that. And whether I like it or not, ego plays a big part of it. Of course it does. Ego is a huge driver for men in particular, but for society as a whole, a lot of things. And again, that's a double-edged sword. Of course, ego causes problems because, like, alpha personalities clash with other alpha personalities. It's tough in relationships. There's selfishness associated with it. But equally, the envelope doesn't get pushed without people striving for more. And you need the ego to help you to strive for more. So for sure, ego plays a part in it too. And now I just hope as I get older, and with those like pretty brutal experiences that I've been through, that I can acknowledge the drivers and try to find a healthy balance in my life with like self-esteem issues and manhood and ego, and still like live my dreams, but not coming through like a wrecking ball to anyone else in my life. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And very well said. Like that's it's important. Like you can't have dark without light. And like there's no negative to things. It's all about how we use them in circumstance, right? Like the ego is a very important part of our self-worth and our self-esteem. But if that puts down other people's self-worth to build yours up, now it's a negative kind of connotation of how that thing can be represented, right? Like I think of, what from the experiences we had just traveling and things like that, you have the ability to lead. I remember just being in the airport and you just walking out and be like, don't worry, this is what's going to happen next. And it did happen next. But there wasn't, no one raised a voice. There wasn't anything wrong with it, but you knew exactly what had to take place next. And I think that that's important. And that, speaking towards being a father, you're going to be an amazing father, right? Like that's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
and
that's another fear. Who knows? Like my bloodline has got a history of not being so amazing on the male side. But yeah, I hope so. I'm going to certainly dedicate myself to it.
Absolutely. And like something about you is like long suffering, right? Like the endurability of something. That's something you don't see in people. Like I like the term long suffering because it's like suffering, it has a perspective. And I think that that's something you put in the blog that was really well written, is just the idea that you can suffer as long as you want, but you can get out of it if you just want to change your perspective, right? And that's sometimes where my ability to come out of depressions and things like that comes from, is being like witnessing it as a state of mind instead of a disability of mind, right? Like I can be like, okay, how do I make this 10% better today? Not fucking be amazing today, but get a little bit better. And I see that in lots of the things you do. Like what drives you to want to run an ultra marathon, row across the Atlantic?
Before we talk about that, I just wanted to ask you, have you ever heard about, when I was at the North Pole, someone told me about this beautiful thing about happiness. He was an academic guy, also like an absolute legend, some high-end academic in his free time running marathons at the North Pole. But anyway, he's 50 and he won it, 52 or something. He won the bloody marathon there. It was cool. He was in my tent and he told me about type 1 and type 2 happiness. Have you heard about this before?
No, I haven't. No.
Mate, it really moved me. Okay, so basically the idea is that there's two general types of happiness, let's say, and we need them both, but we should strive more for type 2 happiness. So type 1 happiness has always been instant gratification. And this theory has been around for a long time, but never more appropriate now with Generation Z, millennials, social media, online access to porn and blah, blah. So type 1 happiness is absolute instant gratification. I am tired, give me a Coca-Cola. Like, I'm horny, I'm just going to watch porn. I'm not going to make any connections with anyone. I'm tired, I work from home, I'm going to sleep rather than, okay? Instant gratification. Often not the correct decision, but you get exactly what you want in that moment. And type 2, but not to say that it's not always, we need both. Of course we need both. But generally type 1 can be destructive. It's answering an instant need. Type 2 happiness is something that requires sacrifice and discipline over a long period of time. And to reach the final goal in type 2 happiness takes consistency and discipline and sacrifice. And there's a lot of pain, emotional, physical, financial also too, and time pressures in order to achieve your type 2 happiness. But at the end of that journey, chasing the type 2 happiness, for example, running an ultramarathon or rowing the Atlantic or climbing Everest or whatever, at the end of it, you finish your goal and the happiness is much deeper, it's much bigger, and more importantly, you can lean on that happiness for the rest of your life. You can refer back to that happiness, and that happiness will exist deep within you forever because you earned it, you worked hard for it, and you sacrificed for it. So, of course, you still get the euphoria of finishing it. So you still get the gratification, but then you get something deeper than that you can lean on for the rest of your life, and that's type 2 happiness. And society, unfortunately, through social media and stuff, if we were to draw a graph historically of type 1 and type 2 happiness, that graph is only going in one direction with easy access to the internet on your phone and your tablet and stuff. And people are leaning far too heavily on type 1 happiness. And then there's a massive void of type 2 happiness. So then ultimately there's nothing for them to lean on when times are tough.
That's so well said, and an amazing like theory on it. Like, I always think when we think about even trauma, how quickly it's ingrained. Sometimes when you're doing something good, like something good that causes you physical pain or causes you suffering or something like that, I think of this as an exercise because obviously I love working out, and there's physical pain in that. There's also like failure in it. Like you go through senses of failure, and if you didn't, you would never get to pride. You would never get to a point of self-actualization that I did accomplish this. So I always like to think that some of the hardest things I've ever done are so stuck in my memory because I survived them. Right. That is a point of my happiness. And I like to think I wish that I wasn't someone that fell victim to type 1 happiness. I think, like you said, we need balance in it, but that is a profound way to look at it, is just differentiating those two things and giving yourself a realization that like, maybe this is just a point where, I need to be looking more at that long game. Yeah. So that's cool. That's very cool. Yeah. I really, when I had a point here that I just kind of took from your, that I don't know how to fit into here, but I really want to, because it kind of goes there. Like when you found your misery on the boat, for instance, you kind of call it misery because you're fucking miserable. I assume it sounds fucking miserable, soaking wet, jock itch, just, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Did you find that as like, when I think of misery, like there's lots of like stoicism that I've read, and it's like the ability to prepare for war after misery, right? You go through it. Then did you find, cause you came out of like a state of, depression or that, just that misery to a degree that you at least saw light at the end of the tunnel. Were you more prepared at that halfway point in the Atlantic?
Well, actually, like the misery in that first month, you have a GPS system on the boat to make sure you're not going in the wrong bloody direction and you're going to end up in Canada. You need to end up in the Caribbean, right? And the dot on the map moves so slowly. So, I mean, like negligible.
Yeah.
And each shift in the cabin when you're miserable and you're getting thrown around and you can't sleep and like takes an eternity. In that 2 hours, and the dot doesn't move, and you just think, I've got thousands of these shifts and the dot's not moving. So that's why it was such a tough experience for me, because the first month I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what really punished me. And I know from all other stuff that I've done in my life, especially the every country thing, it took me 10 years of money and sacrifice and You have to break it into bite-sized chunks. And it's so easy to say, but I just kept getting lost in that first month in the sheer duration of it. And I really failed in handling the mentality of it. But once we got to the 2/3 points, so like 6-7 weeks in, that's finally when I could tangibly dream of finishing it. Although, talking about no light at the end of the tunnel, that was also a defense mechanism that I see now looking back, that I didn't allow myself to visualize finishing in a way that if you're climbing mountains or running ultras or cycling across countries, you can visualize, because it's only a few weeks away, expeditions. But this was months. So because I was so miserable, I really didn't allow myself to visualize arriving in the Caribbean, drinking champagne, having a shower, because it's so far away, both literally in a time sense and in terms of the emotions that I would have then versus the emotions I'm having now. It's far too far away to be able to bridge the gap. So I didn't allow myself to even consider what finishing would be like until I reached like halfway and beyond.
That's and that makes sense. And I saw actually today that you put in a previous blog that you forgot about in 2017 or something, that you wanted to row across the Atlantic.
Yeah, that was cool.
So like so are you a big visualizer? Like, is that a big, like, manifestation, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
Is that kind of your ticket?
Massive, bro. But not, I wouldn't call, well, I guess it depends what you call it. I wouldn't call it visualization, but I set a goal for myself, and big goals. This is what I'm saying about tough love. I really want to become a life coach, Ian, but I think it's the industry's been so destroyed by charlatans. Like, don't take advice from someone you wouldn't swap positions with, right? But I feel like I've done a lot and achieved a lot, and I really want to help people with this. But they would have to be ready for some tough love, because I'm not a soft approach. So I say, like, dream big, have a big goal. If you're sitting on the couch and you're overweight, don't sign up for a 5K. Sign up for a marathon 6 months from now. You'll still do your 5Ks in your training, but go big. You can do it. Yeah. You're capable of it. I promise. People like me are not freaks. All we do is commit to it, and that's it. And then eventually you get there. So in terms of like manifestations, I'm such a big believer in having genuine goals, but not some bullshit you put on Instagram and call it a goal. An actual goal that you have deep in your heart and your mind, that you're going to make sure every decision that you take from now till then, subconsciously and consciously, is going to drag you to that goal. And I did it with making money online. I'm awful with tech. I managed to do it. I did it with every country. I've always dreamed of having a big, growing up, like, obviously without any money, and I grew up in a small house in Ireland. I've always dreamed of having this, like, a luxury house. And to be honest, that was a bit of a pipe dream coming from the kind of town that I come from. But now I've almost manifested that, because it's at the forefront of my mind, these goals. And there's not 1,000 of them. There's a handful. Like, I have a goal, for example, that I'm nowhere near, let's say, of having $5 million in investments. And after I reach that, I'm not going to ever take another penny. I'm going to donate everything, right? And I know that I'm going to reach that, because I've got so much experience in setting big goals for myself and reaching them. And that will be a goal that I reach. And with the house, it was the same thing. And now with Everest in 2023, I've just signed up for. It's at the forefront of my mind. Every single day I think about it. So, like, then you become a force of nature, because you're dragging yourself to that goal. But it has to be a genuine emotional commitment. You can't just say it. And all these life-affirming things of writing it down and stuff, I do believe in that. But it doesn't mean that you can just write it down and think that that's it. That's your goal step. You have to believe it deep in your heart, and everything you do has to be about it. Are
you afraid of your goals? Like, in a positive connotation, are you afraid of them? The way, like, when so you don't have, so do you feel that you take what some people might call anxiety and turn it into excitement?
No, God knows I'm an anxiety-ridden guy. Like, I'm a stress all the time about stuff. But I'm so confident in reaching my goals now at this stage of my life, that I'm excited about my goals. Like, I'm excited about this house. I'm excited about Everest. I'm excited about the South Pole expedition, because I've done enough. I've been through the ringer with reaching my goals so many times that I know that it's happening. I know that it's going to happen. So now I can be excited about the outcome. And this is the same whole thing about type 2 happiness. David Goggins calls it the cookie jar. That you go through, you set a goal, you suffer like hell to get to that goal. And then now you have that experience of suffering for your goal, right? And then you've done it another time and another time and another time until you've got a litany of experiences where you fucking dug so deep, hated yourself, ended up broke or in hospital or blah, blah, blah. But you reached your goal and you put another cookie in the jar for that. So now the next time you set a goal, you've got this massive jar full of fucking cookies. You know you've been through the ringer before. So it's just going through the ringer one more time. And your confidence becomes more and more and more. And your goals can become bigger and bigger and bigger because you've been through it. And I'm now starting to get to the middle of that, or hopefully even on the far end of that, where I can set big, big goals and lean on my past experiences and know that they're going to come. It's going to be a lot of suffering to get there, but I'm ready for it.
And so when you're thinking, like, because I think you saying that, I do feel like it comes from you overcome the fear of failure by failing enough. Not even failing, because you don't give up. Like, that's the thing, is you're not giving up on your dreams. Like, you set such a large goal, but you figure it out along the way. And are you a planner? I guess that's a better way to ask it. Are you a big planning guy?
No, I plan
like a perfectionist.
No, not a perfectionist at all.
Okay, I like that. That's good. No, I ask people this all the time because that's perfectionism is why people stay on the fucking couch. Because they would think they're going to get the result from the fucking perfect way they execute it. You're not executing jack shit.
I call it paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
And it annoys me sometimes too. Like, I put on loads of weight after my row because I've been stuck in that boat. So I was just eating chocolate cake and chocolate biscuits for weeks. I was at my mum's house, waiting for paperwork to get back to Thailand. And now I'm killing myself twice a day to lose it in the gym, right? So when I have like friends I'm dragging along to do these crazy ultras or mountains or whatever, and sometimes you get people who are like, yeah, and I was thinking, like, should I have the 6 whole meal bread slices or should I have the 5 whole meal bread? And they were putting on a forum, which bread is better, the 6 whole meal? I'm like, just fucking eat the bread, mate. Worry about waking up at 5 and going for a run. That's all you need to worry about. The bread is 0.1% difference to you. Waking up at 5 and doing the run, 99%. Just do the run. When you're a beast, then worry about the bread. Yeah,
that's it. Like, people, they're hyperfixate, and I think that's a distraction, right? It's just, it makes it easier on them for sure.
Completely.
Yeah. Even like starting this. Oh fuck, Nina has wanted to kill me for the past how many years, just because it's like, hey, guess what I'm doing? She's like, how are you going to do that? And it's like, watch. And it's like, oh, you're going to fumble the whole fucking thing. That's how you're going to do it. And I'm like, but I'm still crawling. I'm still going. And it would be infuriating, but at the same time, if you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. Like, you kind of have to just put your faith in yourself. I feel like that's where a lot of people are fucked up, is they don't have trust in themselves. And if you can't have trust in yourself, no one's going to help you. And like, that's the idea of a life coach. Anyone can make you feel better about yourself. But like you said, you got to be a tough motherfucker that's just like, hey, you know why you haven't done anything? It's because you haven't tried doing anything. Go do shit. Go on. And like, make a plan.
Bro, so honestly, I normally hate like over the top American self-help, but David Goggins is just an actual legend. And he talks about it saying, he doesn't want people, he's like, I don't want people to read my motherfucking book and be motivated. Motivation's great now, you're going to go and run 20 miles. But when it's snowing outside and it's dark, motivation's not going to make you run. I want people to be driven. Anyway, like, he's over the top.
I just felt like I was listening to David Goggins. I can't even tell.
You need drive, not motivation, and it's true. You know, and it's true. Because, like, I'm quite an upbeat person, and I like to go and face my fears. And I know that when I talk to people, I do some blog coaching for people. I know that when they get off the phone, they're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to make my blog a success, and I'm going to travel the world. I know they feel like that. And then it dissipates because I haven't spoken to them in a week or two, and nothing's happened between this call and the last call, because they were motivated in the short term, but they weren't driven.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, and everyone, like, when you look at like actual like neurochemistry and how things, you have to take action to find a reason to be motivated. Mm-hmm. Like, the action is the pinnacle point where you step off from. But I think that's where a lot of people also think that they have to take massive action. And it's like, no, you set the alarm, right? Like, that's a massive action. Then listen to the alarm. that's the next massive action.
Yeah.
But you don't need to, you know, get the perfect groceries from Whole Foods, right? Just along the way, those minor habits are going to like build up. And that's the thing is it's the small things. Like, do you find your small actionable, you know, understanding consequence, but also, you know, relying on small actionable habits? Is that where you kind of found your success a lot?
Honestly, I just set these big goals, and then every decision I make is going towards those. And I'm so scared of failing those goals that I know I'll put in the hard yards to make sure I don't. But you know, there is a downside to all of this too, though, and it's how you deal with failure, and that's something I'm awful at. I don't know if you saw about 18 months ago, I climbed the highest mountain in South America. It's called Aconcagua. Mm-hmm. And the season before, I went to climb it. It's about a 3-week expedition on the mountain, and we got to high camp, and the weather was shit, and no one summited for 3 weeks. So we failed the expedition. And then for that, and you can only climb these high altitude mountains in the right season. And that meant I had to wait another year until I could try it again. And that year was a tough year for me. Every time I was like having fun or whatever, I would just get a wave of, yeah, but you failed at Aconcagua last year. You got to wait. And I just couldn't wait to get back to do it again. And I think there is a lesson there too, that you have to deal with failure a bit better. You can't let it eat you up like it did me.
That's interesting. That's because yeah, it's like you knew you were going to go back. You knew you were going to accomplish it. It's just the fact that it got you before you could do it the first time around.
Yeah, but then it's also dangerous because as long as you know you're going to give it every single ounce of your ability, then you should learn how to deal with failure, and I'm bad at that. But if people approach that the wrong way, it's dangerous, because to say to someone failure is okay, and therefore they don't put the maximum effort in because they know that failure is okay, that's equally dangerous. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you come across failure, if something gets the best of you, but you gave your best, yes, that's a very different situation than just going into it and be like, well, we'll see what happens. It's like, no, you fucking go do it. You're gonna, everything you go and do. And that's something that is a point of admiration I have for you, and that we've spoken about before, just previously on the trip and things like that. So it's really cool to see. And, you know, like I when I was reading even about, like, in the blog about being, you know, being in that state of isolation, is this where a lot of these thoughts came from? Like, are these new? Because you were talking about, you didn't want to go on a solo retreat or a silent retreat, and that, you know, you don't want to, you overthink, or that, you know, imposter syndrome's real, like all of those things. Are you prepared to do that now? Is that where you feel another expedition of yourself is inward? Yeah,
you know that. So for your listeners, it's global, but I live in Southeast Asia, and it's really popular here to go on these like week-long silent retreats, and you have to meditate. And I've never meditated in my life, so I'd have to learn first, but whatever. And you meditate for like, I think it's like 12 hours a day.
Man, Sam Harris's Waking Up podcast, shout out, maybe he'll love it, but that's a really good place to learn to meditate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's 12 or maybe like 15 hours a day, and you don't speak to anyone for 7 days. You're not allowed to, and you're not allowed to make eye contact, and you're on your own. But there's people there, but you're on your own because you can't speak or look at anyone. And I've always been terrified by it because, like I said, I've got a lot of anxiety. I stress a lot at night about like thinking how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do that. And I was always scared of those emotions and anxieties like being amplified by having nothing to consider but those things. So I've always avoided doing those retreats, and I've got friends who've done them, and they always appeal to me because I thought like anyone who does them is a beast. Like, to be able to sit with your own emotions and feelings intensely like that for hours and days on end is really impressive. And I've got so much respect for the people who do it, but I didn't think I was strong enough to do it, or I was too scared to do it. And then obviously, of course, I had to do that on the boat, and I hadn't prepared myself for it. So now, actually, since doing the boat, I'm quite keen to do one of those things. Would you do one of those things?
I would love to. I don't think I'd do a good job at it. I think that there's a lot of things locked up in there that I wouldn't have even known that would be dusted off. but absolutely, I would love that. If you want to host a trip like that, you would see me there.
Everyone just ends up in floods of tears. Just in case people that I know are listening to it, I can't be too specific, but I've got some friends who are into some dodgy stuff over the years. And like hard guys. And I know a guy who's in floods of tears in it. And like the thought of him breaking down in floods of tears just blows my mind. So yeah, I find the whole thing fascinating. But yeah, I'm quite keen for it now, whereas in the past I was so scared. So the road's definitely done something for me. Those things are cheap, bro. You talk about opportunity cost. If you had a way to step away from your business, me too, it's costs like $100 for a week to do that. It's really cheap to do it over here. Like really almost negligible. And often they're in India, often they're free and you just give a donation to cover your food. Yeah, something to think about anyway.
Absolutely. I definitely.
It's scary, but yeah, it's certainly introspective.
It definitely one step inward. It's it would be definitely something that would be probably the most terrifying. I'm a bit of a psychonaut. I love mushrooms, so like and like that's not comparable in any degree, but I think it's a disassociation kind of aspect, and I imagine going into silence would eventually lead to a type of disassociation. And I can honestly say that most of my profound, tragically healing experiences came from something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So I recommend it too. Yeah, I definitely. And I think like I don't want to go to like British Columbia, Canada, BC here to do a silent retreat. I want to go with where there's the authentic, right? It's even like talking about the Waking Up app. You probably can find some people that know how to meditate versus just Sam Harris, right? So in your region, but it's that's very cool. It's like there's just one more thing I want to ask, which is just as you're going through life and everything you've accomplished and everything you want to do here, like coming up, who do you see yourself as?
Just a normal dude, mate. I'm just a normal dude who commits to big goals. That's it. I'm so normal. And actually, I'm less than normal. So what I try to do when I do all these things, I try to bring my friends along with me, right? When I think of friendship, I used to think of it like who's fun to go and get drunk with, who's like fun when you're sitting around a table, who's like got good jokes, you know what I mean? And they're your friends. And then as I got older, I realized like everyone's personality is different. Not everyone can tell a joke. Not everyone likes to be center of attention when you're out drinking. Like that's an awful gauge of friendship. And then over the last 5 years, what I truly believe makes you a good friend is, do you make that person's life better or not, right? Simple as that. And I really want to make sure that I'm a good friend to my friends. So I really hope that I'm the person through direct relationships makes their life better, like the guys that have been dragging on ultra marathons. And they went from expat, Irish bar, overweight drinking guys. Now they're doing ultra marathons with me in Thailand. And I know that their life is better for it. And I feel very proud of that. And then I hope through my blog and my social media, then I can extend that to the wider world or wider community, that people like get dragged along in the motivation or drive that allows them to see that they can make positive changes in their life, like with just being a normal person. And then when I think to truly highlight how normal or below average I am, one of the guys I've got running at the moment, who we're going to do an ultra with in a couple of months, who had never run before, now he's running far further, far faster than me in 8 weeks. Because he's far more talented than I am. You know what I mean? I'm working with not a lot of talent. And I'm doing this. And then I'm stuck when I bully my friends, like positive bullying I call it, into doing these cool things. At least half of them are so much naturally stronger, faster, fitter than I am. So I would say I'm average at best in these things. And I'm still managing to achieve big goals and get rewarded for it. So anyone can do it. That's what I hope people see.
that's huge. Like it's that's the thing is like I think you inspire people to find their own self-worth and what they can accomplish, right? Like and it's not even, you're just kind of, I like, what did you call it? What kind of bullying? Positive bullying. That's good. That's the way to do it. It's something that, when they get into it, are they just like, has anyone ever been like, hey, thanks for getting me to do this?
All the time, mate.
That must be the fucking best in the world.
I don't know if you saw 2 weeks ago, I just finished the row, right? And I still can't grip with my hands from
yeah.
the wars 2 months later. Brutal. And my body's wrecked. I haven't used my calf muscles for 2 months, so running and stuff's really hard. So I'm trying to get back into running at the moment. And I was in England, and I haven't seen my friends for ages because of COVID. And I said, right, boys, 3 of them, said, I'm gonna sign us up, 4 of us up to do these 3-peak challenge. It's the highest mountain in England, highest mountain in Scotland, and the highest mountain in Wales. And you have to do it in 24 hours, drive in between them. You hike all through the night and all. And 2 of them, well, they'd all piled the pounds on over COVID. They'd all been in the pub, drinking at home, whatever. And I gave them 10 days. I was like, we're doing it now. And they lived like monks for 10 days. And our group was the slowest group that struggled the most, needed the most G-ups, the most energy gels. And we scrambled in 23 hours, 45 minutes. And the journey back, and that night when we're celebrating on a pub crawl, they were just like, thank you, yeah. It would have been another boring weekend in the pub for them, and now they've achieved this huge challenge that they've thought about doing over the years, and blah, blah, blah. You're busy, and life comes at you fast. And then we all did it together, and we got to share it together, and they managed to do it. And it's cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really, so like even, and it's not, like, would you say that your friends have changed over the years? Like you said, it used to be the people that laugh and that kind of stuff. And those obviously still have qualities, but I think about friendship at sometimes in the sense of like, it's not how much time you spend together. It's obviously what that person gives to you, right? Like even us talking today has a huge amount of, it's just really nice to speak with you. And there's a saying that you said to me once, and we've only spent, the 2 weeks together in our lives, but you were like, be a good guy, not a nice guy.
Yeah.
And I lived by that motto. And that was just something you said to me. And there's numerous other things, but it just goes to show that like where you can derive friendship from and help people is both pretty much your character, but also what you want to bestow on them. Right.
Yeah. But let's not be carried away. Like I've got a short temper. I'm grumpy. I can be selfish with like egotistical too. Like I'm not.
I think you're an Irish dick for sure.
Yeah. I'm not some legend. And
no,
that's what I really hope that my message is on my blog and stuff is that when you think about people like Goggins or any of these ultra runners or fitness beasts that you see on Instagram and you're in awe of them, me too, but they're so far away from what you think you are that you just appreciate their achievements and be like, wow, what an amazing guy. Whereas I don't think I am that guy, or I hope I'm not that guy. I hope I'm more of the guy of like, whoa, that guy did it. I can do it.
That guy?
That's actually the reality,
Yeah. That's fair. That's good to stay. It is like you kind of have to be humble about it because again, that is how people get inspired. Like if you watch Goggins, you're going to be like, holy shit, like I can't fucking do what that guy does.
Exactly.
Right. Even though he was like a fat living at home, like exterminator or whatever. And that's the thing is it's like everyone can build themselves up to be whoever they want to be, but you got to be the one that builds it. Right. But there's probably, like your buddies are lucky to have someone around them that's like, hey, get fucking building, man. Like get on it. So it's all still self-responsibility.
I don't know how lucky.
Yeah. No.
The two guys that I'm getting running at the moment, I just sent them a WhatsApp this morning because they're both in Thailand, an English guy and an Irish guy. I was like, boys, it's Thursday today. I was like, boys, it's coming. I get out on Monday. We're training on Tuesday. Get ready. I'm trying to get them to do this 250-kilometer ultra marathon. These ultra marathons aren't actual. They don't exist as events. I just draw them on Google Maps and then we do it.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah.
You're just... So it's not like you don't like sign up to anything. You just find a route and you're like, let's go.
Well, we don't find the route. I just go online. The last one I did, right? That was the first ultra my mate ever did. 200 kilometers, 150 miles straight shot. Legit distance that is. Like that's Goggins-esque distance as a straight shot. They'd never even run a marathon before. And I just drew it on Google Maps. I didn't know anything about the incline, the decline, whatever. When we got to the 100-mile mark, and we were in the north of Thailand, and we had these little ultra running packs on. We run out of water, but we keep stopping at 7-Elevens or whatever to fill up the water every kind of 20 kilometers or whatever, every half marathon distance. And it was like 2 a.m, pitch black, freezing. So we're up at altitude. And then I look at the Google map, and there's like 25 kilometers of national park that we have to run through. No street lights, no access to water, no access to food. We've already done 100 miles. We've got no supplies. And it was just me and 2 mates, and it was me who designed it by drawing Google Maps. And I was like, I'm sorry, boys, but like, we just got to get through this next 25K. So I'm sorry, but
that's so fucking funny. That's amazing. So like, and so you can see, and it's nice. It's probably like, oh, you get to run through a national park, but it's pitch black.
Yeah.
That's that is so funny. That's good. So you just plan this next one out and you're good to go. You're just going to go for it.
There's a place called Hua Hin, 2 hours drive south of Bangkok. It's like a beach resort. And that's about 200 miles, between 150 and 200 miles. I think we're going to try to run from here to there.
That's intense. That's insane. So you're really like, just because I want to, we'll kind of wrap this up, but when did you get so into physicality? Because obviously most of what I talk about is normally like sports and things like that. Like, have you always been an athlete to a degree?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be pretty good at football. I played field hockey for Ireland. So I was always like quite talented with sports really. And then at university, I went to like the best sports uni in Europe. It's called Loughborough University in England. And then I just went on the booze, mate, for 4 years and did nothing, which is a big regret in my life, actually. One of my biggest regrets. But then when I started traveling the world, when I was teaching English in Thailand for a year, anytime I'm stationary, I'm in the gym 4, 5, 6 times a week if I'm stationary. But I'm never stationary, really. It's probably about a month or 2 in the year that I'm stationary.
Yeah.
So through the every country in the world thing, I could never have the opportunity to be in good shape. Anytime I was stuck for a month, I'm in the gym every day, but I never had enough time to build any longevity. But then when I finished my every country thing in 2017, after that hard drinking bout of depression, that was tough. And then again, I've been on the road climbing all those mountains in Russia and Argentina and So rather than building beach muscles over the last 3 or 4 years, aesthetics, I've had to, and like I cycled a trans-country cycle and all. I just had to do functional fitness because if I'm going to cycle for 2,000 miles, I'd never cycled before, so I just need to learn how to cycle. If I'm going to start running ultras, I need to do ultra training. If I'm going to climb mountains, I need to do functional fitness. So I haven't really had the chance to do any aesthetic stuff. And then we talk about ego. Sometimes, like now, for example, I'm going to have 5 months in Thailand stationary, which will be, again, the longest I've had in so long. I think about doing aesthetics. So as soon as I start doing aesthetics and start sculpting my body back, then I just think like, fuck, wouldn't it be cool to run to that beach resort 250 miles away? And then I've got to get right back into ultra training for like a month or 2, and then lifting weight out by the wayside. So fitness, like, is a huge passion of mine. But I lost 10 years of it with my every country in the world thing. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah. No, and you can't, when you running an ultra, you can't expend calories to build muscle, right? Like to the same degree. Like it's like you're expecting a lot from, like, I don't know, like even Goggins is a unit. And then it's like, he kind of leans out when he has to run ultras, right? Like you're carrying a large.
There's a guy on YouTube called Nick Bear. You ever follow him?
Yeah.
You follow him?
Not on YouTube. No, I think I've seen him on Instagram.
I love that guy. It was him who inspired me to do he did 100 miles, so I wanted to do 150. That's why we did that first 200 kilometer one.
Yeah.
But he's a beast. Like he's stacked.
He's built.
And he just ran a sub 3 hour marathon, which is not like elite speed. 2:01 is the world record, but basically, for anyone who knows running, to run if you run around 4 hours, it means you've trained a fair bit for your marathon. If you run 3.5 hours, it means you're actually a decent